"Put your finger down, ma'am, or the next thing you point at will be the booking camera." Those were the words I heard Judge Caprio say, and the air in that courtroom changed so fast it felt like the temperature had dropped. The woman at the podium didn't move. Her hand stayed raised, one red polished finger aimed straight at the bench, her diamond bracelet trembling under the fluorescent lights, and from where I sat in the middle row, I could see the exact moment everyone realized this had gone far beyond a traffic matter. I'd heard sharp exchanges in court before, but this was different. The judge wasn't shouting. His voice was low, controlled, and final, which somehow made it more powerful. The woman's face, polished and expensive and furious, held the kind of disbelief that only comes from someone who has spent years assuming consequences were for other people. Let me back up. This happened on a rainy Tuesday morning, January 16, 2024, in Courtroom 3B of Providence Municipal Court. I had come expecting the usual string of parking cases, license issues, and fine disputes. I had no idea I was about to witness one of the clearest collisions between privilege and accountability I'd ever seen. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, I want to know where you're watching this from. Drop a comment with your location, and if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button now, because what unfolded in that courtroom is something you need to see. The courtroom itself looked worn in the way old public buildings often do, like it had spent decades carrying other people's mistakes without complaint. The benches were scratched smooth by coats and elbows. The radiator along the left wall clanked every few minutes like it had opinions of its own. Rain tapped against the high windows, and every time someone opened the hallway door, the smell of wet concrete and stale coffee drifted in for a second before the door shut again. The fluorescent lights flattened everything. Cheap jackets and tailored wool both looked tired under them. That morning the gallery was fuller than usual. There was an older woman in a red scarf folding her notice into smaller and smaller squares. A construction worker with white dust still on his boots sat 2 rows ahead of me. A young mother near the aisle bounced a restless little boy on her knee until the bailiff gave her a look and she settled him. Then the defendant stepped forward and the whole room noticed. Her name was Vanessa Mercer. Even before the clerk finished reading it, I heard whispers move through the benches. She was the wife of billionaire investor Daniel Mercer, a man whose name showed up on hospital wings, gala banners, and newspaper business pages all over Rhode Island. Vanessa carried herself with the smooth certainty of someone used to seeing doors open before she reached them. She wore a cream-colored coat draped over her shoulders instead of through the sleeves, a fitted black dress, pointed heels, and a gold watch that flashed every time she moved her hand. Her hair was pulled into a sleek knot, not a strand loose. At her feet sat a structured leather handbag that looked like it had never once been set on a dirty floor. Behind her sat a thin woman in a navy suit, later identified as her assistant, Claire Donnelly, holding a folder against her chest like it might protect them both. The bailiff called the case. 3 citations tied to a black Bentley Bentayga registered to Mercer Family Holdings, parking in a wheelchair access aisle outside Providence Rehabilitation Center on October 22, 2023, blocking part of a fire lane, then failure to appear after notice had been mailed, bringing the total to $685. Judge Caprio looked over the file, glasses low on his nose, yellow legal pad angled near his hand. He had that same steady expression he often wore, patient without being passive. I watched him study Vanessa for just a second longer than he'd studied the paperwork. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, "were you the driver that morning?" She rested one hand on the podium and answered with a calm that already sounded edged. "I was there, yes, but this has been blown completely out of proportion." The construction worker ahead of me shifted and glanced toward the older woman in the scarf. She didn't return the look. Her eyes stayed fixed on the bench. The judge asked her to explain. Vanessa said she had stopped for what she called a literal moment while dropping off event paperwork related to a rehabilitation fundraiser. She said the curb was full, traffic was backed up, and she had no driver that morning. She spoke in smooth, practiced sentences, the kind people use when they've spent years presenting themselves at banquets and charity luncheons. "I was handling a charitable obligation," she said. "I wasn't abandoning the vehicle. And frankly, Your Honor, delivery vans do this all over the city. Judge Caprio looked at her for a beat. That may be, he replied, but today we're talking about you. She gave a short laugh that found no company in the room. Exactly, she said, as if he had somehow proved her point. He asked whether she had received notice of the December hearing she missed. Vanessa gave the smallest shrug. My household receives a huge volume of mail. Staff sorts business, legal, and personal correspondence. Without lifting his voice, the judge said, if staff opens your mail, staff still doesn't serve your consequences. A low murmur moved through the room. The older woman in the scarf nodded once, slowly. The young mother near the aisle leaned forward. Vanessa's smile thinned. With respect, some families manage larger operations than others. A courtroom, Judge Caprio answered, is not a concierge desk. That landed harder. I saw Claire close her eyes briefly, like she had hoped this case might be unpleasant but survivable, and was beginning to realize it wasn't. The city prosecutor, Megan Keating, stood and called the parking enforcement officer who issued the citations. Officer Daniel Lima was sworn in and spoke in a voice so steady it made the room lean closer. He testified that on October 22nd at 9:18 a.m., he was dispatched to Providence Rehabilitation Center after staff reported a luxury SUV parked across the striped access area next to a designated handicap van space and overlapping a fire lane marking. He said he began timing the violation when he arrived. How long was the vehicle there? Keating asked. 19 minutes, Officer Lima answered. Vanessa immediately shook her head. That's impossible. The judge lifted one finger without looking at her. She stopped talking, but only barely. Officer Lima continued. He explained that while the Bentley sat there, a transport van carrying an elderly stroke patient could not properly deploy its side ramp. Rehab staff and the patient's daughter had to unload the man at an awkward angle near the curb in light rain. The room grew still in a different way then. I noticed the construction worker sit back and fold his arms tighter. Someone behind me whispered, "Come on," under his breath. Then the prosecutor called the patient himself. His name was Samuel Ortiz. He rose carefully from the front row with the help of a cane and his daughter Elena at his side. He wore a brown zip-up sweater and sensible shoes, the sort of outfit that said he was there for function, not appearance. His daughter kept one hand under his elbow as they approached, and the tenderness of that movement drew everyone's attention before he said a word. Samuel spoke softly, but the room had gone so quiet every word carried. He said he was 68, a retired electrician from Pawtucket, attending therapy 3 times a week after a stroke. On that October morning, he had arrived for balance treatment. Because the Bentley blocked the access aisle, the van ramp couldn't deploy the usual way, so they had to improvise. "We waited first," he said. "We thought whoever parked there would come right back. Then my daughter said we couldn't wait longer." He described being lowered closer to traffic than he liked, with one wheel of the chair near pooled water by the curb. He said he didn't fall, but he felt unsteady and embarrassed. When he used that word embarrassed, I heard the young mother near the aisle inhale sharply. Elena spoke next. Her voice shook more than her father's. She said the whole thing lasted only minutes, but when someone is recovering from a stroke, even a small problem becomes larger. "He works hard to keep his confidence," she said, glancing toward her father. That morning made him feel helpless. Vanessa leaned toward the podium microphone. "I had no idea there was a patient involved," she said quickly. "No one told me that." Judge Caprio turned to her. "You needed to be told a wheelchair aisle is for wheelchairs?" The sentence was calm. The effect was not. A man near the back rubbed his forehead. The older woman in the scarf closed her eyes for a second and exhaled through her nose. Vanessa said she was being framed as though she had intentionally harmed someone. That word, intentionally, seemed very important to her. She asked Officer Lima whether he tickets every delivery van in the city. She asked Samuel whether he had actually fallen. She asked Elena whether any physical injury had occurred. It wasn't just her questions, it was the tone, clipped and superior, like she believed inconvenience only became real when it happened to someone of consequence. Judge Caprio let the questions go on for a minute, then said, "Mrs. Mercer, careful. Every answer you force here is making the room understand this case better, not you." That was the first time I saw real irritation flash across her face. "I'm defending myself," she replied. "You are," he said, "but defense and contempt are not the same thing." Then the prosecutor introduced the certified notice records. The missed court notice had been signed for at the Mercer residence on December 2nd. The signature belonged to Claire Donnelly. Claire looked like she wanted to disappear into the bench. Keating then referred to a voicemail left with the clerk's office 6 days later. She read it from the clerk's notation. Vanessa Mercer had identified herself and said, "This needs to come off the docket. I'm not spending a Friday morning with parking violators." That line passed through the courtroom like a current. The construction worker looked down and laughed once without humor. The older woman in the scarf whispered, "Well, there it is." I saw Claire's shoulders fold inward, but Keating wasn't done. Vanessa had also reportedly said, "My family funds enough of this city already." Vanessa jumped in at once. "That is not the full context." Judge Caprio fixed his eyes on her. "Then give me the context." She hesitated. That hesitation mattered. It was the first moment her confidence didn't arrive on time. "I was frustrated," she said. "We had personal issues going on. I was overwhelmed. People say things." The judge rested his pen on the pad. "People reveal things too." I wrote that one down as fast as I could. He asked what personal issues she meant. Vanessa answered that her husband had been traveling constantly, her stepson was in treatment for anxiety, and the family had been under pressure from a financial news story involving one of Daniel Mercer's firms. For the first time, I heard something real underneath the polish. Strain, fatigue, maybe loneliness. Judge Caprio listened patiently. Then he said, "Pressure explains behavior. It doesn't erase responsibility." Vanessa nodded too quickly. "Exactly." He shook his head once. "No, you're still trying to tell this court that your life is too important to stand in the same line as everyone else." That line hit the room hard. The young mother near the aisle looked down at her son and kissed the top of his head. Samuel Ortiz sat very still, his hands folded over his cane. The prosecutor then asked permission to introduce a public social media post from 2 days after the ticket was issued. Judge Caprio allowed it. Keating read the caption attached to a photo of Vanessa seated in the Bentley wearing sunglasses and holding coffee. "Back to real life. If the city wants to send me a love note, Claire can deal with it." Claire looked down so sharply it hurt to watch. "That was sarcasm," Vanessa snapped. Judge Caprio answered, "Sarcasm is often honesty dressed for dinner." A man behind me made a quiet sound that might have been a laugh or disbelief. Either way, he kept it brief. By then, it was obvious this case wasn't about lines on pavement anymore. It was about worldview. It was about a woman who had stopped seeing public rules as shared rules at all. She thought they were interruptions. The judge began asking final questions. Had she parked in the access aisle? Yes, but only briefly. Had she missed court? Yes, but unintentionally. Had she called the clerk? Yes, but in frustration. Had she considered that a disabled patient might need that space at the exact moment she decided her errand mattered more? No, she said, because she didn't know. That, Judge Caprio told her, is one of the purest forms of privilege, the ability to cause hardship without ever having to imagine it. No one moved. Even the little boy had gone quiet. Vanessa took a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "You're making me sound monstrous over a parking issue." "No," the judge said. "Your choices are doing that for you." She bristled. "I've spent years raising millions for hospitals and schools in this state." "Then you know," he replied, "why access matters." That should have been the moment she stopped, or softened, or simply paid the fine and left. But pride has its own momentum. Vanessa's voice rose. "This is selective enforcement," she said. "I'm being turned into an example because my husband has a public name." Judge Caprio gave her a look that was part warning, part invitation to recover. "Don't confuse my patience with weakness." Still, she kept going. She gestured toward the gallery. "These people don't know what pressure is." she said. They don't know what it's like to have every move examined, every mistake magnified, every family issue turned into... The judge interrupted her, and his voice cut clean through hers. These people are the public. I felt that sentence move through the room like wind through a door crack. He pointed toward the benches. They took time off work, they found rides, they arranged childcare, they came here and waited their turn. They are not beneath you. For one brief second she looked like she might cry. But anger got there first. It hardened her face and straightened her spine. My husband's taxes pay salaries in this city, she said. Judge Caprio didn't blink. Taxes are not a crown. Claire whispered, Vanessa, please, barely audible. I heard it anyway. Vanessa stepped closer to the podium. This whole performance is small-minded. Last warning, the judge said. Then came the mistake that ended everything. Vanessa lifted her right hand and pointed directly at him, not a vague gesture, not a moment of exasperation, a straight, accusing finger. You work for people like us, she said. The room froze so completely I could hear the wall clock ticking. Somewhere near the aisle, a paper cup slipped off a bench and rolled across the floor. No one picked it up. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and set them down carefully. Put your finger down, ma'am, or the next thing you point at will be the booking camera. Vanessa didn't lower her hand. Her face had gone bright with fury. Don't threaten me, she shot back. You have no idea who you're talking to. The judge's answer was quiet and absolute. No, you've forgotten who you're speaking to. She opened her mouth again. This is harassment. This is bias. This is exactly why people... He raised one hand toward the bailiff. Deputy. Everything moved at once after that, but it did not feel chaotic. The bailiff and a sheriff's deputy approached from opposite sides. Claire stood halfway, then sat back down when Vanessa jerked her arm away and said, Don't touch me. Judge Caprio spoke over the movement. Mrs. Mercer, you are in contempt of court. I remember glancing at the wall clock because the speed of it stunned me. From the instant she raised her finger to the instant the deputy took her wrist, about 45 seconds had passed. The gallery broke into fragments of reaction. The older woman in the scarf covered her mouth. The construction worker leaned back hard and whispered, She really did it. The young mother tightened her hold on her son. Samuel Ortiz looked down at his cane, then over at his daughter, who gave the smallest shake of her head like she still couldn't believe what she was seeing. Vanessa's anger cracked into disbelief. Are you serious right now? She demanded, as the deputy brought her hands behind her back. I am entirely serious, the judge replied. The cuffs clicked shut with a sharp metallic sound that seemed louder than it should have. Her bracelet hit the metal once, bright and delicate against the cold sound of restraint. That detail stayed with me. Wealth and authority had been sitting side by side on her wrist all morning. Only one of them mattered now. Then Judge Caprio said something I'll never forget. Money may buy comfort, he told her, but it does not buy standing in this room. No one made a sound. Even the rain against the windows seemed to ease off for a moment. As the deputies led her toward the side door, Vanessa's steps lost all their earlier rhythm. She had entered with the precise click of someone arriving to be tolerated. She left in broken beats. The judge called a short recess. People didn't start talking right away. That was what struck me most. They just sat there holding the moment. Then whispers spread bench to bench. The construction worker shook his head and said, Same law for everybody, that's all it should be. The older woman in the scarf dabbed one eye and murmured, That poor gentleman in the wheelchair. One of the younger women in the back said, I've never seen someone talk themselves into handcuffs. After several minutes, Vanessa was brought back in. The cuffs were off by then. Her coat was gone. Her hair was still neat, but not immaculate anymore. There was a faint track in her mascara under one eye, and her expression had changed in the way people change when certainty has been replaced by exposure. She looked smaller, not physically, but socially. The room no longer bent around her. Judge Caprio resumed with the same measured tone he'd used from the start. Mrs. Mercer, I held you briefly because this court will not permit contempt, intimidation, or class privilege to govern proceedings. Do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor, she said, and her voice broke on the last word. He let the silence rest there. Do you wish to say anything before I resolve the underlying matter? Vanessa swallowed. I thought for a second she might still fight. Instead, she looked toward Samuel Ortiz, then down at the podium. I was rude, she said, to the officer, to the clerk, to the court, and to Mr. Ortiz. She pressed her lips together and tried again. I made this about my inconvenience because that's what I've been doing. I didn't think about what that space meant because I never have to. I'm sorry. The apology wasn't beautiful. That made it sound more real. Judge Caprio nodded once. An apology, he said, is not decoration. It is a beginning. Then he delivered the ruling. The full $685 in fines would be paid that day, no reduction. The contempt sanction would be $500, suspended on the condition that Vanessa complete 20 hours of community service within 30 days at Providence Rehabilitation Center, assisting the patient transport desk. The whole room leaned in as he explained why. You parked where access lives, he said. So now you will spend time where access is protected. Maybe service will teach what comfort concealed. He also ordered written apologies to the clerk's office, Officer Lema and Samuel Ortiz. Not because paper fixes everything, he said, but because careless words should be answered with deliberate ones. Vanessa nodded through tears she was trying not to show. Claire cried quietly behind her, one hand pressed to her mouth. Then came the line that settled over the room with the weight of principle. The law is not offended by wealth, Judge Caprio said. It is offended when wealth is used as a reason to ignore the humanity of others. Samuel Ortiz watched him, then slowly nodded. Elena's expression softened for the first time all morning. The judge wasn't finished. And one more thing, he added. You will remain in this courtroom until noon and observe every case after yours. You said you were not spending a morning with parking violators. Today, you will. A faint wave of approval moved through the gallery, not triumph, something better, balance. Vanessa whispered, Yes, Your Honor. Court resumed. A delivery driver with expired registration, a nursing aide contesting a snow route ticket, a father explaining missed payments after cut work hours. Vanessa sat in the front row and listened to all of it, really listened. I saw her watch people fumble with receipts, explain broken-down cars, apologize for missed dates, and stand in the same public vulnerability she had tried to outrank. When noon finally came, the rain had stopped. A pale stripe of winter light stretched across the courtroom floor. People rose slowly, gathering coats and papers. The construction worker buttoned his jacket and said, almost to himself, Nobody's better than the line. The older woman in the scarf gave Samuel Ortiz a soft smile as she passed. The young mother adjusted her son on her hip and looked back once at the bench before leaving. Vanessa remained seated a moment longer than everyone else. Claire touched her shoulder. Then they stood and walked out through the same public door everyone else used. I stayed back for a second, looking at the empty podium, the witness chair, the spot where Samuel Ortiz had stood with his cane, and the space beside the bench where the deputy had waited. I kept thinking about how fast status evaporates when it collides with principle. 45 seconds. That was all it took for entitlement to become contempt, and contempt to become custody. I walked out of that courthouse thinking about what real justice looks like. It isn't noise. It isn't revenge. It's a boundary held firmly enough that the richest person in the room and the most vulnerable person in the room both understand the same truth. Dignity is equal, and rules mean nothing if they bend only toward power. So let me ask you this. When someone's privilege blinds them to the damage they cause, what kind of consequence actually teaches the lesson? And what would most people do if they were forced in public to see themselves the way others have been seeing them all along? Tell me in the comments what you think about this situation. Do you agree with how Judge Caprio handled it? Let me know below. If this story hit you the way it hit me, hit that like button. Subscribe to see more real courtroom moments like this. Share this with someone who needs to see real justice. There's another powerful story waiting in the next video. I'll see you tomorrow with another story you won't believe.